Right, good evening everybody and welcome to the third episode we're on to now of Wilbur Talks FPL, where we talk everything FPL for the looking back at the previous week and then a preview for the next week and just a general talk about the Premier League in everything that's going on around the transfers, any hot topics that are going on. So the format of the podcast is you've got me, Will, as the host, and we have our regular guests of Sam and Charlie. How are you both doing?
Very well, thank you. Yeah,
all
thanks for
good,
having us
thanks,
back.
Yeah, a pleasure as always. I appreciate you both coming back on. So I think we'll dive into it as we like to do, as we like to talk a lot as we get into it. So we'll start with Sam this week, shall we? Was there any fixture from the last weekend that really caught your eye or you really enjoyed over the weekend?
I thought it was another good weekend all round. To be fair, Premier League football, I thought it's a little bit of a had that real injection of intensity in the first weekend. It was good to just have everyone back playing. But this weekend, you started to see some teams really sort of get stuck into games. There were a couple of games I really enjoyed watching. Leeds Everton was a cracking game. That was one of the best so far of the 20 that we've had. And then last night's game between West Ham and Leicester was quite special as well. But other than that, there were just some really good, convincing performances. Some of you guys might want to mention the other games, so I won't go too much into them. But Leeds Everton probably my pick from the weekend, and then last night, shout to West Ham who looked really good against Leicester as well.
I think Antonio's celebration, we've all got to love that. I think everyone loves Antonio at this stage. He's just a bit of a comedian, isn't he? And fair play to him. His both goals were incredibly well taken as well. He's not just getting tapped.
The second in particular was
unreal, wasn't it, really?
Unreal finish, yeah.
Yeah, I was amazed by the first one, and he just bettered it with the second one. He just absolutely bullied Soyuncu on that first one as well.
Mm.
But yeah, it was all about him really in that game. But obviously the red card had a big impact on it. But I've not really been impressed by Leicester so far, and we'll come to a question later on that I'm a bit unsure about Harvey Barnes in my team because I'm not convinced by Leicester going forward. But it's to be seen in the other games. And yeah, Leeds against Everton was definitely one I was going to mention as well because I think it's what you want to see in the Premier League, isn't it? Just it was kind of all-out attack from either team. They weren't really too fussed about defending. That's what you like to see.
Yeah.
Was there any other games outside of those two that you enjoyed, Charlie, or a result stood out to you?
Yeah, well, obviously the ones you said. I think you can't really go without talking about the 5-0 Man City win against Norwich. I think because it's just so expected, probably that it's maybe doesn't get as much of a mention. But any team beating another team 5-0 is always going to be an interesting one. I think Norwich. We all, I think, predicted them to finish last in the league, and I think they're very quickly sort of showing their potential for that, really, and becoming whipping boys, particularly against the bigger sides. But yeah, it's just kind of same old Man City, really, just steamrolling a team that their bench is probably worth a lot more than the whole of the other club. So yeah, same old there. And I, to be honest, quite enjoyed Liverpool's win over Burnley. I know it probably felt a bit sort of, I don't know what the word is, just kind of, following what you'd expect them to do and quite professional, I guess. But maybe we'll talk about it a little bit later, but Burnley are quickly becoming a side where statistically, particularly defensively, they just aren't putting in the sort of numbers you've seen from them previously. They've had a bit of a thing around them of being a team that, particularly under Sean Dyche, have been able to be quite solid and particularly in away performances. But yeah, they are very quickly becoming a team that just concedes way too many shots, which ends up obviously in a lot of goals. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if I don't think they'll go down, but I think they'll be in a fight certainly at some points of the season.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially that Liverpool first goal is kind of a goal you wouldn't expect Burnley to concede at all.
Yeah.
Because Jota getting in between the two centre-backs, it's just not what you expect. Like, obviously, like Van Dijk did it from a corner, that's understandable, but really, that's not how you expect them to be.
Yeah, that's sort of Burnley's bread and butter, really, kind of defending those. It's almost kind of set-piece situation where crosses coming in from wide. That's what you expect them to deal with. got good centre backs and ones that you usually think of as being good in the air and things like that. But yeah, it's just a bit of lack of defensive awareness and just kind of not really being keyed into the game.
Yeah, I just don't. I wonder if there's just been kind of a change of emphasis a bit by Burnley, like they're trying to attack a bit more and they're kind of getting a bit stuck because they did have the odd chance against Liverpool where they could have actually scored, and I feel like they kind of tried to be too expansive against Brighton in the game before as well. I think they're a bit. I don't know if it's just the media pressure behind them. Everyone just says it's the same old Burnley. I don't know if they're trying to do something different and then forgetting what they do best to keep them in the league. So they're a bit in a catch-22 kind of situation, but just need to get back to the basics, really.
Yeah, and I think a lot of clubs go through that, don't they, really? So you would probably say Crystal Palace are doing that right now in terms of trying to progress from Hodgson into Vieira, who's supposed to, or also said that he wants to be more attacking. And yeah, you see it happen with a lot of teams, but particularly sticking with the same manager, I just don't think they've necessarily got the facilities for that. They should just, as you say, kind of stick to their basics. What they were doing was enough to kind of keep them mid-table quite comfortably. But I think they've also had have they had a new owner come in or something? It was kind of an American company, I think, which a bit of money in there, maybe that would see them try to be a bit different, a bit more glamorous. But yeah, I can't see it really working for them.
Yeah, I know Dyche was having a bit of an issues with the owner, I think, like where they should best to spend funds and stuff like that. I've heard that they might be signing a new, can't think what his name is now, like a left back, kind of left winger for about 15 million that I saw reported. Because I don't think they've been, well, either to play instead of Taylor at left back or just a bit of an improvement down that side. Yeah, there you go. Peter said it there, Cornet in the chat. So it looks like they might actually invest. I can't remember. Well, I feel like Burnley seem to go every summer for like one big signing and then don't really do much outside of that. So 15 million is quite a lot for them to spend on one player based on the past performances. I don't think we can go past Liverpool without asking Sam to comment how he thought they went in that game.
Yeah, I thought first half they were really, really good. It was a shame from a Liverpool fan's perspective that Salah's goal got ruled out when it did, because I think if that goal goes in, we could have been looking at 4 or 5. The momentum was just insane at that point. Great to see fans back inside Anfield. Place was rocking. From a Liverpool fan's perspective, really pleased. Second half, Burnley did grow into a little bit. I think it might have been being a little bit harsh on Burnley, to be fair. Like they weren't that bad. They created some good opportunities. McNeil down the left looked pretty threatening. They'd have been disappointed to concede from a ball into the box for the first goal. Like you say, traditionally they tend to defend set pieces and balls from wide areas quite well. But I think that's probably an anomaly. Burnley will be absolutely fine. You've got no problem thinking that they'll do anything other than stay in the league. Liverpool were good, business-like performance really. On to the next one.
Yeah, definitely job done, wasn't it? Yeah, I think anyone captaining Salah was a bit disappointed, especially with the offside call, but at least Bruno went and did similar later on as well, unfortunately for a United fan now. So
I think on that as well, just to say, I think we have to praise Sam for his comment last week, which we all kind of ignored, was where Sam said about the points or the sort of attacking threat being kind of shared between the Liverpool players when they're at home, and that's obviously what we saw. We saw Mane score, we saw Jota score. So yeah, fair play, Sam.
Yeah, definitely.
Always.
I think I remember. I think I said that as soon as the game finished. I'm taking that advice next time. Just, I think
you'll see that. You'll see that across some of the big teams in the league this season. Maybe a little bit less so with Chelsea, because their very obvious focal point is now Lukaku. Like, they spent so much money on him to play as that 9, as that figurehead. But when United are at Old Trafford, the evidence was there against Leeds. Goal contributions. I know Bruno got a hat-trick, but there could have been goals from a much wider selection of players. The chances were created. And Man City, Pep Roulette, good luck picking who's going to score there. Any of those top 4 teams, when they're at home, I think just through chance creation and through the fluidity that these teams now play with their formations and the interchanging of positions, you're more likely to get a distribution of the goals and goal contributions across all the attacking players. Whereas when teams are away, they tend to just take that direct threat and just pinpoint through to that player. So I think it's certainly one to keep an eye on over the first half of the season.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good point as well, because I was going to mention, because of how well Antonio and Ben Rama have started, would that be kind of the perfect double up for people to be rolling with at this point in time? I'm kind of comparing it to a Kane and Son double up that we saw last season, very useful at the start. Would you both say that double up at the minute is kind of essential to have in your team?
I wouldn't go so far as say essential, but I think, yeah, I mean, obviously, both me and Sam have had both of them in our teams, and obviously it's paid off really well. And their fixtures aren't particularly getting worse or anything. They've still got a fairly good run. They've got Crystal Palace at home and Southampton away next. Then a couple of more difficult games, but still, sprinkled in with some good ones. And we've seen from Antonio he can score against pretty much anyone anyway. And I think, like you say, it's kind of. I think Ben Rama's really fit into that the role Lingard was playing at the end of last season really well, and they've just kind of both really worked off each other really nicely. I think particularly if we're pointing towards FPL, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't go with them because of their price, because they're so reasonably priced. It just doesn't feel like there's any better value at the price points they're at.
Yeah, definitely. You could make an argument last season, like if you didn't want Kane and Son because of how expensive they were, but I definitely agree with that, especially at the start of the season with how volatile the price changes are as well. You can get a lot of value by having them in your team at the minute, so it definitely makes sense to have them in there. So I'm thinking, do we talk about an awful United performance or an awful Arsenal performance first, just to slate us both? But I'm going to let Charlie up a bit this week because I don't think we expected anything else apart from really the result that came. Like, we think Chelsea are going to be right up there this season. What did you both think of Lukaku? I think in terms of FPL and the league, it looked pretty scary for most other teams. I think it was more the hold-up play that had it for me because I don't feel like any of their other forwards provided that, so it provides them something different. What would you say, Sam?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, Arsenal tempted to once again give Arsenal the benefit of the doubt before absolutely going in on them, because the reality is Arsenal are nowhere near Chelsea. They are nowhere near them, and they haven't been for a number of seasons. They might have got one-off game results against them. They might have got better results against them over the last 3 years or whatever. But in terms of sustained performance and competing for trophies, we're talking about a top 4 team and not a top 4 team. So, like you say, the expectation is that Chelsea are just going to turn up and win. Um, but the more concerning result of the two is probably the Brentford result than the Chelsea result if you're looking at it as the two. But like I said last week, kind of give them the benefit of the doubt on that as well, because opening day, new promoted team, under the lights, newly promoted team's home ground, the cameras, everything there just looked like Brentford were going to win that game. No Aubameyang, no Lacazette. But this week Arsenal were really naive. I think the guys on Sky said it really well last night, in the way they tried to defend the ball into Lukaku and the areas around it. But then again, having said that, Arsenal haven't really got the quality of player to be able to execute these tactical phases that Arteta seems to be wanting to try and put in my opinion. Lukaku looks an absolute machine. He looks in incredible physical shape. I love the swagger when he came out afterwards and they asked him what he thought of his performance, and he said he thought he was dominant. Absolutely love that. He's going to take some stopping. But having said that, the Arsenal boys did make it pretty easy for him to do exactly what he wanted to do: get the ball into feet, roll his man, move it around, roll it, knock it off out wide, beat the man in at the back post, and just tap in for his goal. It's hard to say. Obviously, it's a great start for Lukaku. He was dominant. He played really well. Did exactly what everyone knew he was going to do, and Arsenal just didn't have the answer for it. It's going to be interesting to see how Lukaku against Van Dijk fares out at the weekend. If Lukaku has as dominant a performance against Liverpool at the weekend, then certainly there's a case to be said that the Premier League might be in trouble.
Yeah, definitely the one to benchmark. I think Tierney by the end of that game wanted to be going off injured. Now he was just getting exposed so badly down that side with no cover at all. What was your thoughts on that game then, Charlie?
I think Sam's just nailed it really. There was from an Arsenal perspective, there was so much naivety from the players, and just again, like Sam said, there's just not the quality there to deal with the level of Chelsea's players. Both goals came as a result of Tierney tucking in and trying to cover in the middle when it just left Reece James completely free on the side. It's just like, you would think as a professional footballer, you would be aware at least of the players around you and the areas that you're supposed to be taking cover of. And yeah, for most of the game, Tierney ended up having to cover two players, which should just not happen. You would hope that would be something that's spotted by the manager and addressed, but seemingly wasn't. But yeah, in the end, you're just seeing two teams, one that's fighting for a title, one that's not. On Lukaku, yeah, again, same things. He looked absolutely phenomenal. For him to come in straight away and do that as well, it just makes it even more impressive. He's already within that one game kind of ranking up there in terms of the players that have played in both games so far this season in terms of sort of attacking stats and XGs and shots and stuff like that. So that says a lot. He had the most shots of any player this weekend, which is just, yeah, he's looking like an absolute beast, really. In terms of FPL, I'd still be tempted just to hold off a little bit. I don't think you want to be rushing to put him in away to Liverpool. Even, you can still see him scoring, but again, it's because of the price point he's at. I think it makes that a little bit more difficult because you have to just kind of change your team around to try and fit him in. So I'm personally happy to just still give him a few more games just to let him bed in, get a few goals before that really nice run for Chelsea comes in, which is in a few weeks' time. But yeah, it's scary seeing. I think that's the one thing they missed, obviously, last season. The number of times Timo Werner got into good places and obviously missed. Having a striker like that who is going to be clinical, they can rely on him to score goals, and they've got so many creative players in that team now. And they've got the depth as well to change it if they need to be a bit more flexible or change how they're playing. Yeah, it looks scary, really.
A lot of scary teams being developed by the looks of it, but that makes it even more exciting, doesn't it? Really, that kind of puts, as a United fan, making us look more and more like we're just going to sit in fourth. That's probably the best we can get at this point. I've seen Chelsea look like they're going to be signing Koundé as well to be the centre-back, and it looks like Zuma might be going to West Ham at the same time, which I think is a decent deal for both parties, in fairness, because I was looking at the West Ham squad when we were doing a bit of a watch-along last night, and I was saying that centre-back position, it looks so weak. Like Dawson, I don't rate as a proper Premier League centre-half, so to get Zuma in there, I think he could be a decent FPL asset, to be fair, as well, because I think early last season for Chelsea, he scored a lot of goals from corners, and West Ham are really good at set-pieces, so that's one to watch out for there. And Pete's just mentioned about Saul as well, which he was reported to could be going. Well, it seems more likely could be going to Chelsea or maybe even Man United, but I'm not sure. He's exactly the player that Man United really need, which ties us on nicely to United's result, which obviously, from my point of view, is very disappointing. Realistically, we didn't even deserve a point from that game. How terrible we were. I think the main thing I picked up on there was how bad the passing was throughout the game. I think I've mentioned this on one of the pods earlier on, that I'm happy with the signings we've made, but we've still not got the player in that one position that we need it, which is that CDM. So there's rumours about Camavinga, Saul coming in, but I'm not convinced by those signings either that could plug the gap now. So unless the United board somehow magically in the last 7 days or so find a player that's going to fill that void, I don't realistically think we will challenge, and it'll be probably similar to last season where we might be in a battle for the second or third, but I don't realistically think we'll push up higher than that. But obviously that's after 2 games, could click into gear after that, but there's still that one area that I see, and David De Gea definitely saved us at the end. What did you think of United in general from that game, Sam?
I think you might be being a little bit harsh on yourselves. I think you deserved a point on the overall ebb and flow of the game. I thought to start for the first 20 minutes, it was attack v defence for United against Southampton, like training exercise. How you weren't 3-0 up, I have no idea. Like Pogba missed a sitter. I know Pogba got an assist, but that Pogba performance was a typical Pogba performance for the last couple of years, and no taking away from the fact he got 4 assists in the first game week, but obviously there's going to be a retraction to the norm at some point. He had a couple off the line. It was a good finish from Greenwood. I thought Man United looked okay and relatively in control of the game, even when Southampton went to a 5 at the back at 1-1. It looked like the only team that was going to score was United until Sancho came on, which was, excuse me, almost a little, maybe concerning is the wrong word because he's only just arrived, but that substitution seemed to really disrupt any kind of flow that United had. And you had Sancho and Pogba sort of playing off Greenwood, and it just looked a little bit out of shape. So yeah, I think United were okay in the first half. Southampton definitely grew into the game when the crowd got behind them. Like you say, Armstrong could have and definitely should have scored again. And you could have lost the game, but you could have won the game. I think 1-1 was probably a fair result over the balance of 90 minutes. But yeah, like you say, I still don't think United are going to win a trophy under Ole, even if you sign Fabinho and Rodri. Even if you're the 2 best defensive midfielders in the league, or Kante probably in that bracket as well. So it's a bit of a tough one, really. But on the basis of the performance against Southampton specifically, maybe it'd been a little bit harsh. I think 1-1 was probably a fair result.
Yeah, I think go on, John.
Go on. I was going to say, I agree with what Sam was saying there. And actually, if you look at the both the XG and XG conceded, that it was actually very similar to the Leeds game, which is obviously really odd considering the actual end result. It just shows you the difference in terms of when something's just clicking and when the finishes are on point and when things just go your way. So yeah, I think I agree with Sam. I think you are a bit harsh on your own team there, saying that about the disappointment of it, but yeah, in the end, maybe just need that little bit more solidity in the middle just to kind of help, particularly when there's in the Premier League, there's always going to be times where you've got a team kind of pushing back at you regardless of who they are. So you just need to be able to kind of control that, like you did in the Leeds game. Once they'd scored, from then on, you just went on and dominated. That's kind of what you needed. You needed a bit more, and maybe the fact that it's it was an away game, that maybe that played a part, and the Southampton crowd and so on. But yeah, I just thought it was quite interesting seeing that the XG stats were almost identical to the game before.
Yeah, I would say that the thing that I think about the XG and our attacks in general, a lot of our chances came from set pieces, so you could see a clear improvement on how he's delivering set pieces. I think especially that one where we hit the bar and then it was cleared off the line. I don't know how that translates to XG, but I can imagine that chance created a lot in the XG calculations, and a lot of the balls being whipped in from set pieces were unreal. I think it was disappointing from open play. We didn't seem to create a lot, which is obviously concerning, especially if you've got teams playing deep and difficult to break down. But like I said, it's only been 2 game weeks, so we'll see how it goes next week. But disappointing to start with that, but we'll see how it goes. So have we got anything else I want to mention about the last round of fixtures, or should we move on to our actual FPL performance?
I think just a quick one. I think we should recognise Spurs to a certain degree, unfortunately for Charlie, with a gritty win at Wolves, which is basically anything but Spursy, which is kind of what we've branded them for so long. 2 games. Kane's played a total of 20 minutes, and Spurs have got 6 points. Probably not to be that they'll go under the radar for a little while. And we'll see what happens, but they definitely seem to be a bit sharper defensively. So we'll see what happens with that one. And Brighton looked pretty good against Watford as well. So again, another team that will probably go under the radar for a little while for the first 10 games or so, and then we'll see where they're both at. But good starts to the season for both of those.
I've seen quite a few people looking to invest in the Spurs defence, especially Reguilon. Obviously, I don't think many people thought they'd get maybe even one clean sheet out of the first two, so it's quite surprising they've had that defensive side to the game, which has gone well for him so far. It's quite an open game, that one, to be fair, and they did well to come away with it over 1-0, so yeah, I'd agree with that comment. Just going back to that Chelsea game as well that Charlie mentioned about Lukaku's shots, I've seen a graphic where he had 8 shots in the 1 game week, which is more than any other player across the 2 game weeks, so it shows what he's going to bring to him, even if it's just shooting on sight, let alone that goal scoring ability. Right, so we'll move on to how we all did in FPL this week. I feel like we should start with the man top of the league. So I'll go to you, Sam. How did you find your game week? Do you want to talk us through it a bit?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was a sensational game week once again. With an element of luck, I sat on the pod last week saying you need to captain Bruno, don't captain Salah. I was 99.9% sure at the deadline, having done my team on the app, that Fernandes had been appointed my captain. Logged on after the deadline to find that Salah had been appointed captain, and turned out to work in my favour. But yeah, Trent, Alexander-Arnold and Tsimikas both with assist and clean sheet returns. Sanchez with a clean sheet. Shaw with the bonuses. Ben Rama and Antonio Ings, Greenwood, all with goals. Yeah, just one of those weeks. And another one of those weeks, I'm under no illusions that I'm not going to average 99 points for the rest of the season. Otherwise, we'll be picking up the trophy at the end of the year. But it's certainly been an above average start. Delighted to be top of the league, and target on the back. We'll see where we go forward from here.
Yeah, you can't complain with that score, 88 in the week, so you're currently ranked 13,000 in the world. So
yeah, highest ever rank, that, so that's pretty cool.
That's one to put on the CV, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't complain with that start. I'm looking at your team and I'm like, really, it's the ones that we all were banking on, Salah and Bruno, that was the only ones, and Tony, that are letting the team down. But
it's interesting because Fernandes last week had such a huge points haul, and Salah had a big points haul, but I would probably say Fernandes's points haul was maybe slightly above the level above average that Salah's was. That there was always going to be a retraction to a certain extent, but when they blank, it just when a player gets 15, 20 points one week and then blanks, it stings so much more than if they get a goal and then they drop from a goal to an assist, and you get that constant ticking over of points. When you look at it in the big picture, Fernandes has averaged. So he got 20 points in game week. So he's averaging 10.5 points per game week at the moment. That's insane. Just if he does that every game for the rest of the season, no one will talk about it. But I would just say, like we said in the tips at the start, trying not to be too reactive over these performances and looking at your whole team and how these individual players are performing over the game weeks and the average number of points, as you both touched on XGA and got expected goals being the measures of being able to work out how well your players are doing. Because off the back of this, you could look at Salah and Fernandes and think, I could downgrade one of them to a Pogba or a Jota, and then save 5 million. But ultimately, those guys probably aren't going to be hitting the numbers that these guys are when they have a good week.
Yeah, I think obviously Salah and Bruno are great assets, but especially when they've got such a big score in game week 1, you wouldn't even consider them blanking in the game week after or transferring them out. There's kind of that pressure that everyone's going to be bringing in that player, so you have to keep them in there, or you need to captain them just to keep up with people at the start, especially, I feel. So I can, I think I looked at a stat on Fantasy Premier League, and Salah this week was the most captain player ever, which is a crazy number. I think like
2.8 million people.
Yeah, nearly 3 million, which you understand it, but it was kind of a week for differential captains when we weren't expecting it to be. I actually saw someone in my other league who captained Antonio, so he caught the right one at the right time there. But captaincy is always one of those things. You'll get it right one week and then the other week you won't. But as long as you've got logic behind the decision, I wouldn't beat yourself up too much about it. Just comes and goes every week, doesn't it? Like last week, they both hold, and then typically neither of them hold this week. So you can catch it and you can't catch it. So we better move on to Charlie's then, who sits above me but below Sam in the league. Did you find your week, Charlie?
Yeah, they're very good as well, really. I've probably you can just I've got a similar team to Sam's anyway, so many of the same players doing well. The ones that are slightly different, Rafinha's the main one because he got a very nice goal in that Leeds Everton game.
Yeah.
And I'm particularly looking forward to this week as well. I don't know if we highlighted last week or I guess you kind of showed it from Trent's points all this week that Burnley's left-hand side is poor. And that's where they concede a lot of their chances because that's the side Dwight McNeil plays. Obviously, he pushes on a bit forward. That just leaves Charlie Taylor at left back really exposed. So I'm really looking forward to Rafinha going up against him. Obviously, now I've said that, he'll blank and maybe get a sent off or something. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that game anyway. And he's a bit of a differential, at least amongst our league. I think he's starting to get a bit more traction, particularly as the fixtures get a bit nicer for Leeds in the next few weeks. But yeah, I'm pleased with that. Barnes is the other one who's is different. I guess you're in the same boat. We're just trying to decide whether or not he's someone that should be on the way out or not. The fact that they're up against Norwich is going to be tough to try and sell him ahead of that game. But it's then about trying to work out, is he going to stay in the team? What's going to happen as a result of that Perez red card? In terms of their formation, are they going to keep the same? Or are they going to try and switch back to their 2 up top formation from last year? So yeah, kind of disappointed with him because he's not done anything in 2 games, and he's one that he's one of those players that it's a really frustrating own in fantasy football because the manager's just really talking him up. He looks really active, not so much in the last game, but just in general, he's the kind of player that looks quite exciting to watch, but doesn't always result in points. I think you could probably point as Adama Traore as being the kind of the main person to do that. So it's always quite difficult to sell those kinds of players if they look lively. But yeah, he might be first out the door. The other one, I've got Dina on my bench as well, and he's very close to the exit, I have to say.
Yeah, Digne is always a funny one, isn't it? It's just you'll get rid of him and he'll get a monster haul, won't he? I would say. The Everton have conceded in both games, but I think 2 of the 3 goals have been an error by Michael Keane. So they haven't been too bad defensively. I think, is it Godfrey that is still out for them, who's probably their best defender, so they're suffering a bit with that. But Digne is one of those ones can get the attacking returns, isn't he? So I can understand why you're considering it. I think this week I'm just a bit stuck with 2 free transfers, what actual move to make. But that Barnes is definitely one in my consideration. And you touched on Rafinha as well. I think my plan was always to try avoid him for the first 4 game weeks because I knew he had United and Liverpool, and then think about him after that. So I'm hoping.
I can't believe. Sorry, but I can't believe you're talking about taking Barnes out now ahead of Norwich. Like, this is the fixture you have to keep him for. Like, if you've held Barnes last week as well, Barnes has to be in your team. For this fixture against Norwich. Norwich are basically relegation fodder 2 weeks in, but they got nothing. So if you've got Barnes, I don't understand why you would consider dropping. I'm not sure what price he is, like 6.5 or 7.
7, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I agree on that. My caveat was it depends on the formation with Perez going out. So
Yeah.
I would pay close attention to any. There's a couple of Leicester. Sort of in the know accounts on Twitter, and just keeping an eye on press conferences and stuff, just to kind of get any hint about what the team might look like going into next week. Because if there's a hint of a change of formation and they do go to a 2 up top, it's possible Barnes could drop out. It feels so harsh on Iheanacho the way that he's dropped out of the team, considering the season he had last year. So I wouldn't, and obviously they signed Daka as well as a I guess a backup at this point, but maybe he'll come in as well. But yeah, I totally agree that the Norwich fixture is the one you want of those first 3. It's just whether he's going to play.
I can see a situation where Leicester still play a 4-2-3-1, and either Iheanacho or Daka plays on the right hand side or the opposite side to Barnes. would just give them fluidity within the game to change how they are. I think Harvey Barnes starts against Norwich personally, but like you say, keep your eyes out for the in the know accounts because they probably more educated around Leicester than I am. But I think if you've got Barnes in, keep him for this week would be my advice.
We'll get to that one because I've got a question for you both around Barnes when we get a bit more to the transfer section. What was it? I was going to say something about Barnes then. Yeah, I was going to make a point about that formation. In both of the games so far, they've changed to that formation when I've got two strikers. Even against West Ham, they put Daka and Iheanacho up front and then Maddison behind. So they definitely have been training with those two formations to be able to change. So I'm a bit wary, along with what Charlie's saying, that they could do that. But I agree with what Sam's saying as well. It's that Norwich, if they didn't have Norwich next, I don't think it would be a question if he'd be leaving the team. But it's up in the air at the minute. Right, so if we move on to mine, so Charlie got 85, wasn't it, Charlie? And then Sam got 88. And I got 73. The main difference is being the goalkeeper, which I'm already unhappy with. I don't think it was that wise choosing a Watford goalkeeper to start with, but he has got a good run coming up, so I'm going to stick with him for now. And then the main one that I've been mentioning to the guys before as well is Ben Rama, that's really costing me at the minute. I think he's got 24 points this season and Sam's beating me by 25 points. So it shows a difference a few players can make to you. So I think looking at our teams across the three of us, I think we've got a slight difference in midfield. I've got a different goalkeeper. But apart from that, a lot of the team is exactly the same, really. And that's why I think we're excited to think about transfers the next few weeks, because it moves us away from this template kind of model and making our own decisions, really. So I think Charlie was sat about 40k, aren't you, in the rankings? So Sam's 30,
Yeah, something like that.
You're 40, and I'm 300, which it shows you how condensed everyone is at the start of the season. So one thing I would say, even if you're ranked like 3 or 4 million, there's not going to be a lot of difference between that and some of the higher places. So don't be disheartened straight away on the rank. I think you need to give it at least 10, 15 weeks before you see how your real rank is going to come out, and then you can push on from there. And even from that point, you can still push on and change it a lot. So have we got anything else we wanted to know about our performances this week? I think we've covered it all, really, haven't we?
Oh, I think we're all good.
Yep, so the break in play for the quiz as usual. And we've got a slightly different way of doing it this time. So the other quizzes we've been looking at FPL from last season, which I think I've kind of ran a bit ragged at this point. So I've got a few different areas. So the first round is going to be purely on Premier League. So I've got two categories here, basically goals and assists. And who won last week then? So Charlie won last week, didn't you, Charlie? So
Yeah, Charlie won.
Yeah, I think
so. I'll give Sam the choice. So I've got the top 10 goal scorers in Premier League history, and I've got the top 10 assisters in Premier League history. So since the Premier League started in 1992, 1993. And so you can pick which one you want to try get all 10 of. So I'm going to give you both 10 guesses. I'm not going to penalise you if you get one wrong, but you get 10 guesses and I'll give you a score out of 10 from that. Does that make sense?
Yep. Give me the goals.
So you want the goals up? Yeah, I think if I was choosing, I would have told the goals, because I'm looking at this
James
list.
Ward-Prowse is going to haunt me forever.
Are you sure he's not in top 10 goal scorers of all time in Premier League? I think he might be.
I don't even know if he's in Southampton.
Yeah. That would be a good one, to be fair. Right, so yeah, like I said, it's 10. I think because some of these are quite hard, when you give me an answer and if it's correct, I will tell you how many goals and where they sit in the rankings, because I'm not expecting both of you to get 10 here, because some of the lower down ones are quite difficult. So you've got 10 guesses. 10 guesses, there's no time limit, Sam.
Okay, cool. So I'll be disappointed with myself if I don't get 8 here, I think. Right, Alan Shearer.
That is correct. Number 1 with 260 goals in the Premier League.
Wayne Rooney.
Number 2 with 208.
Andy Cole.
Andy Cole is number 3, 187.
Thierry Henry.
Thierry Henry is number 6 with 175.
Number 6, you say?
Yeah, number 6.
Okay. Aguero.
Aguero is number 4 with 184.
Robbie Fowler.
Robbie Fowler is number 8 with 163.
Harry Kane.
Harry Kane's number 7 with 166.
Lampard.
Lampard's number 5, 177.
All right.
So you've got the top 8. You're looking for 9 and 10 with your last 2 guesses.
Jermaine Defoe.
Number 9, 162. That was a good one, that.
Then stumped. It's a few. Could be there or thereabouts. But I really don't know. Let's go for Robin Van Persie.
No, it's actually Michael Owen with 150.
Oh, Michael Owen. Okay.
Yeah, so 9 out of 10. That was good showing.
Take 9 out of 10.
Yeah, that was and I think the goals are easier than the assists, just as a warning, Charlie.
I'd have been stumped.
Yeah, if you get some of these, if you get 9, I'll be very impressed with these assists. So I've gave it a short straw with this, I think.
No, fair enough. Like, yeah.
Right,
guess the cheese first as well.
So we've got 10 guesses, and I'll do as I could have said as Sam. I'll tell you what position they're in and how many.
Okay. I think some of my... I'm going to have to make some educated guesses here based on assists. It's going to have to be on longevity, I reckon, some of them. Well, I'm sure number 1 is Giggs.
That's correct. Miles clear on 162.
Of course, I'm going to have to go for the Arsenal man, so I'm going to have to say Dennis Bergkamp.
He is down at number 5, 94.
Frank Lampard.
Did I say Bergkamp was 4 or 5? Because Bergkamp was 5 and Lampard's 4. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I said 4 for Bergkamp. So Lampard is 4 with 102.
Cesc Fabregas.
He's second, 111.
Gerrard must be in the top 10.
Gerrard is number 7 with 92. So at the minute you're missing 3rd, 6th, and then 8, 9, and 10.
That's still quite high up. How many was Frank Lampard?
102 in number 4 in 4th. So he's got more than 102.
Someone's got more than 100. I would guess then, based on again longevity in the Prem, probably Rooney.
Yeah, he's 3rd.
Yeah. Okay.
That's correct, yeah. So you've got the 2 that feature on both lists. Rooney and Lampard are on both lists.
Yeah. So what am I down to? 8, 9, and 10?
You've got 6, 8, 9, and 10. So you've got... Someone's got more than Gerrard, who got 92.
I would... Trying to work out with if some of them, like more recent players, would have pushed over some of the older players. I'm gonna take. I'm struggling now. I'm gonna take a guess at KDB just because of his performance recently.
KDB is number 10, so just squeaking in there with 78.
Okay.
If you'd got to about 5, I would have started giving you clues, but you've got 7, so I feel like I'm not in a position to give you clues for the other 3. So you need number 6, number 8, and number 9.
6, 8, and 9.
So as a gauge, 7 is Gerrard on 92. So you've got 1 above him and then 2 below.
Thierry Henry.
It's incorrect.
Is he close? He must be close.
I didn't go much further past 10, if I'm honest.
Oh, okay. I think he's around, but yeah, probably.
Yeah, I feel like it was about 60 or 70, and the lowest in this is 78.
Okay.
All I can say is if you get number 8, I'll be impressed.
Okay. David Silva.
He's number 6. So he had more than Gerrard by 1, so he got 93. So you've got 8th and 9th left, and you've got one guess. They are quite horrible, these two.
Okay, yeah. I'm just going
number 8.
Yeah, okay. I'm just going to guess on... Because of the sheer number of appearances, I'm going to go for my good old trusty Gareth Barry, because he just seems to pop up in these kinds of things because of the number of games he's played.
No, it's not Gareth Barry.
Gareth Barry?
I bet you he's top 10.
I reckon I know. I think I know the one that you are saying that we wouldn't know.
Go on then.
But just because there's Mr. James Milner.
Yeah, James Milner's number 8 with 85.
I don't know the other one.
So number 9 has got 80. Anyone want to guess at 80? He's got more than KDB, but he doesn't play anymore. Used to play for United in the glory years.
Oh, Beckham.
Yeah. So Beckham had 2 more than KDB. So he did quite well, to be fair. He got 8 there, Charlie.
Okay, can I just address...
Gareth Barry.
That's better than the JWP.
Gareth Barry is on the same level as James Ward-Prowse.
There's logic, because Gareth Barry has doesn't he have the most appearances in the Premier League of any player ever?
Yeah, he does, yeah.
Yeah.
I bet you this next round.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. But he could be, I guarantee he must be then top 20 or top 20 or 30.
We'll find out. We'll find out for next week.
Yeah, we'll do 11 till 20 next week. I think he's probably similar to what Pete is mentioning in the chat of Scholes as well, that he's probably the assister of the assister a lot of the time. I can imagine Scholes always played it out wide and then someone whipped it in like Giggs or Beckham. So it could be like that. So would you like to call it there, or I've also got another round? But I'm used to you guys tying on rounds, so I normally have to have a backup.
We can call it. That's fair enough. Sam's won that.
Yeah,
GG.
We'll give you that one. I'll give you an advantage next time, Charlie, because you did have the harder category on that one.
I agree. I did.
You did well. If you got Milner, I would have been surprised, but Sam did get it.
I only know Milner through being a Liverpool fan, really.
But again, Milner's a similar thing as, like, it's just his appearances, really, isn't it?
Yeah, well, when you said, like, because of his longevity, I was like, he's going to say Milner here. I was like, he's along the right lines, but yeah, Milner's actually...
I think Milner used to take a lot of set pieces, to be fair.
There we go. Hills coming in the chat. Barry got 64. That's not far off.
Yeah.
Barry got 64. How many did De Bruyne get?
78. So he's
probably in the
50, maybe.
The ballpark. Thank you very much. I'll leave on that. That's fine.
He's probably got more than Ward-Prowse, to be fair.
Yeah, Milner's the 5th highest appearance maker. So yeah, it's kind of using the right logic, doesn't pick the wrong player. So I'll give you, it was a fair shout, to be fair. And Henry was a decent shout, to be fair. But alright, so we'll move on from that and we'll move on to game week 3. I'll put the question out to both you guys to start with. Is there any particular attractive fixtures that you are either would recommend us targeting or you're going to target yourselves in game week 3? You can go to the quiz winner this week, to Sam.
Yeah, West Ham Palace. Absolutely all over it. Palace, relegation fodder. They are. I'm now even more convinced after the first 2 weeks that my sort of flip of a coin that landed on Palace over Southampton is a more accurate flip than it should have been. Palace are in big trouble. West Ham are in supreme form. How on earth Palace are going to keep them quiet? It's probably going to be 0-0 now that I've said that. But I think it could be another couple of goals for Antonio. Could be another contributing week for Benrahma. I think there's lots of FPL options for this game, the West Ham Palace game, and defenders as well, like Cresswell, Soufal could be good options. The other one to look at is probably Norwich Leicester, like we said before. I still think if you've got Barnes in your team, don't take him out for this week. I mean, I've basically just pinpointed the two what so far has looked to be the two whipping boys, really. But yeah, they'd be the two fixtures I'd necessarily be targeting. I think you could make a case for City against Arsenal as being a fixture to target, but I don't think City have that sort of bully like Lukaku. So I don't think it's going to be quite as one-sided in City Arsenal, even though City probably are the best team in the league. I just think it's City or Arsenal are trying to do what City do, but City just do it better. So therefore, I don't think there's going to be like a overwhelming domination job there. And then Liverpool, Chelsea, the other two big teams in the league, sort of playing at Anfield on Saturday evening. Anything could happen there, in all honesty. So I think Palace, West Ham is the number one to target. Number two, probably Leicester, Norwich. Although I'm not going to be transferring in any Leicester players this week.
Very interesting stat about Palace. In the first two games, they've actually only conceded one big chance, which obviously they lost 3-0 to Chelsea and then had a 0-0. So it seems they're not as bad defensively as you would think, but I don't fancy them going forward. So I've seen a lot of people throwing out there with maybe an Antonio as captain. I'm not sure I'd go that far. It is definitely a good fixture and one to target. I'm not sure I'd go as far as a captaincy pick. Is there any other fixtures apart from them you'd be targeting here, Charlie, or have we covered them with Sam?
Well, yeah, I think Sam's covered it pretty comprehensively. On the Man City Arsenal point, I think Sam's been quite kind, to be honest, towards Arsenal there. I don't think it matters that City don't have a bully up front. I think the fact that I agree on the point that we're kind of trying to play like them, but just not as good and not as good players. But I think if anything that plays into Man City's hands, I think they can just absolutely destroy us on the break, and we'll try and push on them and press on them, and that will play into their hands. Our record against them, I suppose it's probably similar to most teams against Man City, but it's not good at all. I think in the last 5 or 6 games, we've only scored 1 goal against them, and they've scored 11. So, yeah, I have no impressions that we'll do anything against them. I'm fully expecting at least 2, maybe 3-0, 4-0. But again, yeah, like we keep talking about, it's from an FPL perspective, it's almost impossible because of the number of options now they had. Like in the game against Norwich, they were playing Gabriel Jesus out on the right, which meant Mahrez was on the bench, and you just don't really have any clear options. Although a counterpoint to that could be the fact that Mahrez came on and scored, which isn't actually that unusual for Man City. The assets do come on, and because they dominate the ball so much, it just means the opposition are just tired completely by the end of the game. So whoever comes on usually has not a bad chance of scoring anyway. But yeah, all the same fixtures really that Sam talked about. West Ham again. Yeah, I can't see anyone at the moment of the sort of level of teams they're facing stopping the likes of Antonio and Benrahma. The Wolves Man U one is an interesting one because I would assume of the sort of normal popular captain choices, then you would probably go with Bruno, as opposed to obviously Salah, who's playing Chelsea. But Wolves are interesting because they've only conceded 2 goals now in 2 games, which, considering the number of goals that are being scored at the moment in the league, is interesting, and it's something I've got an eye on for the future because of Wolves has a really good run starting from the following week. So yeah, I'm not convinced by that game in terms of what could happen, and then obviously particularly the fact that Man U only scored 1 against Southampton away to Southampton when being away last season was so positive for you. Obviously the change now being the fact that there's fans back in the stadiums and things like that. So yeah, I'm not convinced by the Bruno shout in that game. So I think, yeah, similar to Sam really, West Ham Palace is probably the main game, I think. And maybe a little bit the Leeds Burnley one. I wouldn't have any issues with bringing in Rafinha for the points I mentioned earlier about the issues on Burnley's left side.
Yeah, I was going to mention as well the Spurs Watford that Pete's also mentioned at the same time. Would you not fancy like a Son punt in that game? I know he went off with a bit of a knock in the last game, but even like a Dele Alli, would you not? What do you think about Watford defensively? Would you not say that's a good one for Spurs assets in that game, either of you?
Possibly. I don't. Sorry, Charlie.
No,
You
go
ahead.
on.
I don't really think we've seen enough of Watford defensively to be able to make a real judgment as to what they offer defensively. But at home they conceded twice against Villa, and then they conceded away twice against Brighton, who you wouldn't necessarily associate having the most potent attack in the league. So there's definitely going to be chances for Spurs. But then you look at Spurs, and they only scored one goal in both their opening games. Their only goal last week against Wolves came from the penalty spot. I expect Watford will probably play quite a counter-attacking style of football. So maybe Son could be a good shout. Spurs' players at the moment to me just seem like you're basically going Son or nothing. Still, I haven't really seen enough from any of them around, even the defenders that are being talked about quite a bit. I haven't seen enough to be convinced by them over certain other players in the game. Like for a lot of people that are in the similar kind of template stage as the three of us are, we're going to need to take out one of our premium assets to get Son in. And I don't think you can justify that at the moment based on the performances that those guys are putting in. So you could, if you have Son, why not give him the armband if you haven't got a more viable option. But I don't think it's quite enough yet to be moving premium assets around to bring Son in.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm going to go back to one of kind of Charlie's points about the Man City assets. So if I was forcing either of you to pick a Man City attacker now, which one would you pick? So not a defender, to be a midfielder or a forward. Who would you pick, Charlie?
It's a difficult one. I ultimately I would want to wait until De Bruyne was back properly. We've talked about him a few times. I think he, when fit, is your best shot at a sort of person that's going to stick in the team, attacking wise anyway. I'm not particularly swayed by Grealish. I think particularly playing through the middle, he's just had a bit more of a reduced role compared to what you would see at Villa when he's playing off the left. Or even through the middle, but he would still be in a more 10 position, whereas he's in more of an 8 position, which still in Man City's side means he gets forward plenty, but I don't particularly like the positioning he's in the current team. So if you're forcing me now, I would probably say Mahrez, just because I think because he's had the benching, he could come in, particularly after scoring a goal as well. But yeah, I wouldn't be too thrilled about it either way. If anything, I'd maybe jump into the defence. I'd maybe go someone like Cancelo, who I still think, I've said a few times, I think because his ability on both sides just kind of gives him the shot at more game time, and because he offers obviously both the clean sheet potential and attacking potential.
Yeah, I think he's probably the best asset in City overall, unless you're just going for pure minutes with Diaz. But who would you be going for, Sam, if I forced you to pick one?
I'll be going for Grealish. I think Grealish is the only one out of all of the midfielders and attackers who's guaranteed minutes. You look at the others, and maybe taking Rodri out of the equation. If you're rolling off Mahrez, Sterling, Torres, Gundogan, Bernardo, and Jesus, of all of those, your £100 billion man is starting. And I might be proved wrong from Pep Roulette. I would be taking Grealish if I was going to be taking a City asset, which isn't necessarily a bad time to bring one in, because if City do go on a bit of a run, you could maybe see some price rises. If City do go and beat Arsenal quite comprehensively, they then go Leicester, Southampton. Chelsea, Liverpool fixtures could do anything, but if you've got enough squad depth, you can rotate around those, and then City just go on a City run after that, where they could just win 10 games in a row. So if I was going to pick one up now, it would be Grealish.
I think if I was picking one, it was between Grealish and Torres. I think I mentioned Torres previously, and I thought it was quite interesting that Jesus played out wide and then Torres still played that central role, which I thought was quite odd, and he seems to like to play Torres in that role at the minute. But I'd be concerned when KDB, even Gundogan come back to a bit of fitness, that they could take that kind of false nine spot. But kind of like Sam said, I think there's definitely room to get points for City, but as long as you've got a strong bench and you can have that risk that they're not going to play every game, it's not a bad one to have on there. I feel like a Torres at 7 million is one you could rotate with another midfielder, or even like Tony up front. So I wouldn't completely rule them out as an option. I'm just looking down the fixtures here. Is anyone contemplating the Danny Ings to Calvert-Lewin switch in game week 4? Because Danny Ings' fixtures get really difficult and Calvert-Lewin seems to be...
Yes.
I thought at least one of us would be.
Yeah. That's the plan. The international fixtures dependent, depending on, obviously, I don't know what Kane's status is going to be like, whether he plays in the international break, or if Calvert-Lewin plays. To be perfectly honest, I don't even know who England are playing. It feels like after the Euros, the Premier League's back, and it's such a international football hangover that I just don't really care too much, to be honest. But if Calvert-Lewin plays 1 or 2 international games, then maybe there's an element that he might be a little bit more rusty. But Villa then go into quite an intense period of fixtures, and I think Calvert-Lewin's the obvious swap if you can't afford the jump to Lukaku.
Agreed on that. I've pre-season Ings, that's exactly what I was planning, or not necessarily to DCL, but certainly Ings for the first 3 games and then get him out, because those first three fixtures look so appetizing, and then obviously he comes into this really bad run of fixtures. Not to say that he potentially won't pick up goals, because he just seems to do that sometimes. I had originally, and again this is all pre-season, so not necessarily with the information we've got now, I was looking at a potential Ings to Jimenez move from game week 4 because of the clear sort of change in both the teams' runs, because Aston Villa's first 3 fixtures were so good and then got bad, and then Wolves is the opposite. But I'm not sure I've seen enough from Wolves to grant that. Obviously, you would have liked something from Jimenez, like a goal and assist. Obviously, they've not scored yet. But in terms of stats, though, Jimenez is still getting in the good positions, still getting some good touches in the penalty area. He's the highest of all forwards for penalty area touches, even more than like Antonio, who obviously we're all raving about. The difference is the finishing and the actual chances he's getting, which is the worry. If anything, with Wolves, it seems to be more directed with Traore, who just can't finish. So I think Ings out in game week 4 is guaranteed. It's just about who you go for, whether it's based on the Calvert-Lewin call, like Sam said, dependent on the internationals, or trying to find another differential. But I think a lot of people, I think he's already risen, hasn't he, Calvert-Lewin, by 0.1, I think.
Yeah, he's close to a 0.2 as well.
Exactly, yeah. So he's doing well. Everything about Everton everything that's coming out seems to be saying they are aiming for him. They're trying to effectively create the team around him, in that everything is going in, crosses into the box, aiming for him. And we've seen how good he is in the air now as well. So I can't see him really slowing down in terms of the goals he's producing.
Yeah, I think it's going back to my 2 cheap Everton assets that I recommended at the start of the season with Townsend and Demarai Gray. They love a good cross into him. Demarai Gray looked really good the other day, but I think he looked better because he was playing Leeds. Leeds give you that freedom to play, so I think... I still like... if I had Digne, I wouldn't be getting rid of him from your point of view, Charlie, but I think Digne and Calvert-Lewin would be the ones I'd be targeting if I'm going for Everton, because you can get the perfect Digne set piece to Calvert-Lewin as well, which is the perfect scenario. I remember James Justin crossing for Jamie Vardy last season. It's like the perfect one when you've got both in your FPL team. So you can wait. Well, if they're going for a lot of crosses, you could benefit from that one. I was also looking at that Newcastle fixture. I quite like Callum Wilson if people have got him in his team for that fixture. I can't believe he didn't score. Who was Newcastle playing in the last fixture? I can't remember.
Villa.
Was it Villa? Yeah. He had like an outstanding one-on-one, didn't he? And I can't believe he missed it. It's like, when I saw it was Callum Wilson, I'm like, surely this is a goal. So he's getting them chances, and he can always get a goal against anyone.
I do like Wilson. I just don't like what's around him. Obviously, St. Maximin, there's the sort of flair with him, and he produced, I think that was game week 1 where he produced that really nice cross after a lot of skill against West Ham. I just don't feel like there's enough quality around him to and just because the quality and the level of finisher he is, obviously he will still get goals. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets anywhere between 10 and 15 this season, but it's just too difficult to call because of like I say, I think the squad around him is just not strong enough compared to say someone like Danny Ings, where you've got the likes of Buendia coming in, you've got Bailly coming in, and so on, and obviously Everton we're talking about with these quality in the crosses coming in. It puts me off a little bit off Wilson.
I would agree with that. I think Newcastle are only one of two teams in the league that are below their expected goals, assist, and points so far. It just shows that they really are lacking quality in a lot of areas. I know it's only 2 games in and it's a relatively small sample size, but are any of us really expecting that to change drastically? Probably not.
It's one of those ones, isn't it? You can get lucky with him, and then you can get unlucky. It's just Newcastle defy a lot of stats, and Wilson can just pop up for a goal at any point. I'm looking at this next Leicester fixture, and I'm hoping Bertram's going to be fit after his COVID, so I could potentially be playing a double Leicester defence against Norwich. Do you think I should be going full for that Leicester defence? Surely, if I can play a double Leicester defence against anyone, it's against Norwich. Do you think I've got a good chance of getting a clean sheet in that one?
Yeah.
You'd hope so. Well, I can imagine Pookie's just going to ruin my double clean sheet. He'll finally decide to score, which would be quite annoying. So I think we mentioned Liverpool-Chelsea one, didn't we? Are we thinking a stalemate, kind of like 1-1, 0-0? I can't remember if that was before the podcast, before we jumped on.
Honestly, that game could be anything. It's one of those weird ones. It's an evening game at Anfield. Strange things happen. Chelsea went there last year, bit of a masterclass, and just tactically superior to Liverpool, nicked to 1-0. And Liverpool went to Chelsea and outsmarted them and beat them 2-0. And it's anything could happen here. I just think it's one of these games at this point in the season where it's more important to both of these teams that they don't lose than it is to maybe go Hail Mary and try and get the win. I expect both teams will have chances. It's probably going to be who's going to get the better of each other out of Van Dijk and Lukaku. Liverpool will not be as naive defensively as Arsenal were, so I can't see Lukaku having as much of a free roam against Liverpool as he did against Arsenal. But we all know how Chelsea are going to set up. They're going to set up with a back three. There'll be back three when they're in possession. Back five when they're out of possession. Jorginho, Kante in the hole. Let's just go and park the big blue bus, and then and there'll be a threat when they get the ball forward quickly. I expect Werner will play against Liverpool. If Chelsea don't play Werner, they'll be missing a trick with Liverpool playing the high line. The ball in behind will be an option all the time. I would have thought. I probably think Werner might come in for Havertz. But other than that, maybe even Pulisic would be a decent option if you're looking at who you're going to pick. But it's going to be a close game. I personally think they're going to end up cancelling each other out, and it'll be a relatively low key game. The best thing for the game would be if Liverpool got the first goal, forced Chelsea to come out and do something. If Chelsea get the first goal, they'll just sit back and defend and hit harder on the counter than they were planning to in the first place. So
yeah, it's the first heavyweight contest really this season, isn't it? But like we mentioned, I can't see it being high scoring. I think it'll probably need a moment of magic to tip it either way. But we know both teams are full of that, so it'll be interesting to see which way it goes. I'm sure it'll be a nervy game, but hopefully it'll be good for the neutrals. Like, we want a few goals for the neutrals, but I can't see it being that way. So I think we've touched on Leeds, Spurs enough already in that. So Sam, you've got Greenwood, haven't you, in your team? Is it? I'm pretty sure you have.
Yeah.
Are you happy with your Greenwood, Bruno, and Shaw in at the minute, or is there possibilities you could be dropping a United?
Well, Wolves haven't really given me any confidence to think that they can score, let alone get a result against United in the opening fixture, or in the game week 3 fixture, should I say. And then United have Newcastle at home after that. West Ham away is not exactly a terrible fixture. And then Villa at home. Everton at home, not a bad fixture. Leicester away. So, although the FDR is indicating that United have 2-4 and 2-3 rated fixtures, if you're looking at how those fixtures are ranked over the course of the season, they're probably better 3s and 4s than you can find elsewhere. I like Greenwood as an option because he's quite clearly playing as the most offensive midfielder in the team. And typically, as we all know, we love midfielders that are playing as strikers and defenders that are playing as midfielders. So Greenwood for me sticks around. Shaw's an interesting one. Fernandez is staying in. Shaw's an interesting one just because I'm very conscious that there could be a time relatively soon where Lukaku becomes an obligation. And at 5.5, I think there are better options available on what's been put forward so far. But like you said a couple of weeks back, Will, Shaw's a form player in that if you don't have him for that 3 or 4 run where he gets like a couple of assists or maybe even a goal, you could really sort of miss out there. So for now, no real worries. Trent and Tsimikas up to now have picked up a lot of defensive points to almost carry Shaw a little bit. But Shaw's set piece delivery against Southampton was exceptional. So, there's always chance. All it takes is Pogba to put his header 2 inches lower and Shaw's got an assist. And Manchester United maybe even go on to get a clean sheet if it goes to 2-0. So it's fine margins. And I'm not really going to be... In previous years, I think I probably would have reacted and taken Shaw out by now. But I've got strategies to try and free up some funds to maybe give myself the option to go in a Lukaku-shaped direction in a few weeks' time, should I feel that to be the move.
I think the thing about Shaw is as well, like, you don't know when he's going to get his points. Like, I always pinpoint that he's scored and got an assist away at City last season. So you'll just get hit by that if you take him out knowing our luck. So I've had the same considerations. I feel like you could probably even get a better value player at like 5 million than that at the minute, but you got to think of the bigger picture with, like you said, with the delivery. I think it must have been from his delivery and everything at the weekend that he managed to get 2 bonus points, even though he didn't get an assist or a goal or anything. But
I also just think, like, after the game against Southampton, Varane has to start against Wolves, right? Like, Lindelof Lindelof wasn't great, but if Ole can't really change the team after being Leeds 5-1 at home, like, then you go, and whenever you're trying to reintegrate a player in, managers typically do this after they get a result that is almost below what they expected they were going to get. And that's probably why, like, you were naturally being a bit harsh on United at the start, because you expect like they should beat Southampton. All of us had Southampton in our bottom 4 at the start of the season. Like, you feel like you should go there and get the result. If you don't get the result there, it looks like you're going to need to make a change. I don't think Sancho coming in is going to happen this week, unless Pogba drops a little bit deeper, but I can't see that happening. So I think Varane coming in, I don't think Varane is as good as Virgil van Dijk, but it will probably have a similar impact on being able to free up Shaw and Wan-Bissaka to maybe play a little bit higher up and just get a little bit more up the pitch, which in turn could offer more threat for those two going forward. So for now, Shaw stays.
And like you were saying as well, the fixtures don't give a reason necessarily for you to take them out, I think. And obviously talking about the set pieces and stuff, which is the attacking bonus, and then the sort of meat and drink is the clean sheets that you're hoping from a defender. And those fixtures you can see probably 2 in the next 4 at least. It's then when you're moving towards game week 7, 8, 9, 10, that's when it's getting difficult for United, and that's conveniently times in with when Chelsea's fixtures would really turn for the good, and that opens up the opportunity. That's when you make your move and open it up for focusing on Chelsea. So I think it just kind of works out quite well in the fixtures for you to just leave in them for the time being over the nice fixtures and then get rid when it comes to the more difficult ones.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking about Greenwood as well, because I don't know if you saw Martial, he just didn't look fit, and he didn't really get the service at the weekend. So Greenwood, I think, is going to play. He should really be playing that striker role, in my opinion, until at least Cavani's fit. And I can't really see Cavani playing until after the international break. So he's going to get at least this Wolves fixture. So Greenwood's a hold for me from that point of view as well. And yeah, sure. I think you made a good point about Varane as well. I think he's going to free up the fullbacks, but the bit I'm interested to see is Ollie can't get past this bit where he has to play 2 defensive midfielders, and I'm hoping if he's got a bit of confidence that Varane's got the pace and he can cover, that he's going to play a bit more attack-minded like second midfielder. So you have a Matic or a Fred sat in front of the back four, and then the other midfield will be given a bit of freedom, whether it be like McTominay, hopefully Van der Beek, but Ollie just doesn't seem to hate him for some reason. But
the problem you've got, Will, is that you just haven't really got a DM that can play as a lone DM.
That's the main
so
issue.
You need, if you're going to have someone like that, they've got to be like literally a purpose-built destructive midfielder, like a Kante or a Fabinho, and you haven't got one of the standard required to play as a lone DM. So I think you're going to take a lot to change this 4-2-3-1, maybe into a 4-3-3 kind of adaptation that Ole's got at the moment.
Yeah, you just can't get away from that 2 CDMs, especially when away from home, which you'd hope he'd go for it a bit more against Southampton. But as we've said, we'll see how it goes when they've got Varane, and hopefully they manage to sign a CDM. But we'll see with that one. We won't rant about them anymore. So I think we need to get to the hot topic of the week, because I think a lot of us have got 2 transfers in the bank from the first game week, rolling it over. So I want to discuss our transfer plans. So if I get your input on what you two are thinking, and then we'll talk a bit more in general. So Charlie, what are you thinking in terms of transfers for this week?
Well, the only 2 players that I've been considering taking out are the 2 ones that you've both said I should leave in my team. So I may change my mind. But no, I mean, really, I almost don't want to use it, which obviously doesn't make sense when you've got 2 and you're obviously going to lose one if you don't use it. So if anything, it may be just on either a backup or a change in the keeper or something. It will again just depend on stuff that comes up in the next couple of days. So we've talked a little bit about what's going to happen at the international break and all these sort of red listed countries and what the effects are, or the knock-on effects are going to be of that. We don't know that information yet in sort of concrete as to what's going to happen. So it makes it a little bit difficult to plan. And also just with the fixture swings as well, I think things change in game week 4, really. That's when you want the two transfers for. So ideally, you only want to be, if you've got 2 transfers this week, I feel like you only really want to be using 1, because you want to carry again 1 over for the following week. So you've got the 2 in the international break. So for me, that's probably going to be used on one of Tsimikas with a price rise, or possibly Digne or Barnes, again, like with the caveats that we mentioned earlier. In terms of who's coming in, for me, I'm quite settled, because of the fact that whoever I bring in is probably likely going to be on my bench anyway, and it's going to be with a view to setting up for the game week 4 fixture swing. Potentially one of the Wolves players, again, is a bit of a risk, because they've not looked great, but it's kind of putting your bets on a change in form based on the fixtures that they've got coming up. So I have been kind of keeping an eye on the likes of Cody or Jimenez as potential options. So and I've got 0.5 in the bank. So Tsimikas could make way for Cody, but again, it would just be to be on the bench this week, but setting up for game week 4 and going on. But I think the key point is, if you can, I would want to be keeping 1 over for the following week, so then you can take 2 into the international break.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. I'll touch on that, what you were talking about with the red listed countries. So we basically had news today, which obviously can change, where it's been said by the Premier League that they won't, basically the Premier League clubs have agreed all together that they won't release any players for international duty if the match is in a red listed country. So that basically means currently there's a lot of debate going on if it'll actually, like, what's going to happen about fines and everything. But at the minute, basically no South American players will be able to go on international duty, because the whole of South America is on the red list. It's a bit more difficult on the African teams. For example, Salah would be able to play one of the 2 games, and then Mane and Benrahma, as an example, would still be able to play both of those games, because the African countries they're playing in aren't on the UK red list. So there's still a lot to find out if people actually go. I'd be slightly concerned with Benrahma travelling twice around Africa, then coming back to play afterwards. That's my concern. And even if they're not going to a red listed country, they could still easily catch COVID, or someone break a secure bubble or something. So at this time, it's still a bit inconclusive. So I definitely agree with maybe use 1 transfer and keep leave one in the bank, so you've got 2 next week. What are your plans then, Sam?
Yeah, so for me, like I just kind of touched on there, I just want to try and give myself as much flexibility as possible. So super pleased that I managed to keep $1 million in the bank before game week 1. And I'm going to be taking out Ben White this week for Livramento, the Southampton fullback, just because I can't justify having Ben White in there at 4.5 when Livramento is going to be playing each week and potentially offering an attacking option at 4.0. And he's just going to be used in rotation as and when Southampton have a favourable fixture, and there's not going to be many of them. But it's just, it frees up an extra 0.5 million. I'm basically in a position where I'm really happy with the team I've got. I don't really want to make too many more changes. There are a couple of options, but I want to keep only using one transfer this week. And for the purpose of where I am at the moment, it's just about protecting value. If Tsimikas was to get the rise to 4.2, I would maybe consider protecting the value more and, transferring him out. But I'm not actually too worried about him taking up that Liverpool slot at the moment, because Liverpool's fixtures, are basically just not amazing until like game week 12, by which point I can see the team probably being in quite a different state to the state it is now. So even if Tsimikas doesn't play any more minutes before game week 12, which isn't completely like set in stone, like Robertson was on the bench at the weekend, and Tsimikas came off, and they brought Joe Gomez on, and that might just be for a case of like protecting injury, but it's not like 100% nailed on that Robertson plays against Chelsea. Obviously, Liverpool want him to play. He's probably the best, if not definitely in the top 3 left backs in world football. But like, it's not 100% set in stone that Robertson is ready to return against Chelsea. And if you are going to put someone back in the fire, like Tsimikas has had a great start to the season. He's in form, like he's got confidence. If he's fit, I wouldn't be surprised to see him in that fixture against Chelsea. Give Robertson the international break to fully get back up to speed, and then bring him back in for Leeds. So, if Tsimikas goes for a price rise, I might just disregard everything that I've just said. But I think saving the 0.5 million on Ben White to bring in a 4.0 option who's likely to get a price rise, so I'm keen to do it before the price rise happens, is probably the way I'm going to go. And then plans for Calvert-Lewin in game week 4. Not really fully convinced by Adam Armstrong just yet. Some poor finishing against Man United, to be perfectly honest. And yeah, that's my plan, I think.
Yeah, I'm very conflicted on mine. It's a similar dilemma to what Charlie's got. Because the glaring area is the midfield. And what do you guys think about Benrahma? So you both have Benrahma, I don't have Benrahma. Do you think at this stage it's someone you should really have in your team? I'm also looking at the fact that Benrahma is probably going to go up in price and Barnes are going to go down in price. So you're also saving team value if you made that kind of straight swap. Because at the minute, if I was going to get Benrahma in, it would be for Barnes or Greenwood. And I'd probably be doing it for Barnes, but I'm just wary of that Norwich fixture. What would you guys do if you was in that situation?
I don't think there's anything to say that Benrahma couldn't match Barnes, but like we said, I think we feel like that West Ham against Crystal Palace game will be high scoring, and Benrahma seems to be directly involved in almost everything West Ham do as well, linking up with Antonio. I would definitely favour taking out Barnes over Greenwood because of everything, all the positives we've mentioned about what Greenwood provides. I guess the only other thing you could look at is the potential fixture. You'd probably argue Barnes against Norwich is... Well, no, you would argue Barnes against Norwich is a better fixture than Manu away to Wolves. But yeah, I think I would just favour Barnes just because I feel like the Benrahma transfer is an important one. I think he is, like you say, because of the increase in price, it just feels like similar to Lingard last season. And actually, statistically as well, it's quite similar as well in terms of actually they are overperforming the expected stats. But that's like I said, that's what they did last year as well. So in my mind, that's more of an indication of this is something that they can do when they're on form, and they clearly are, and they've still got some good fixtures to go with it. So I think I'd probably edge towards it, because unless you've got any other obvious place to spend it on, you're going to have to use one transfer. Obviously, if you only had one, then I don't think I'd do it, and I'd hold it. But because you've got two and you need to use one of them, I think I'd probably do Barnes to Benrahma personally.
Yeah, I think it's just the Norwich fixture that's... If they didn't have Norwich, like, Benrahma's fixture run is so much better, and it makes sense. Because really, the only other transfer I'd be doing would be in defence, to kind of, similar to what Pete said, to take Samikas out and put in, like, Livramento, but it's not, like, it's just using the transfer for the sake of using a transfer. So I'm very much on the fence, and it might be a later in the week decision. What would you say in that situation, Sam?
Benrahma's a funny one, because there's a lot of talk at the start of the season before the deadline was set about, like, kind of came out of nowhere, and these points have kind of come out of nowhere as well. So I do expect like a retraction to the norm from him at some point. I don't think they can possibly keep these numbers up. But while West Ham don't have Europa League to consider, I definitely think like there's potential for him to just keep up the level of point scoring that he's got at the minute. The fixtures are so good: Palace at home, Southampton away, and if they go on that run, or between Southampton and then Manchester United, is when the Europa League starts. So it really depends on how David Moyes approaches that, because if he sort of softens his approach to that, Benrahma could be the absolute must-have if Antonio stays fit. And I think that's another big one, is that the Benrahma Antonio double act is working really well at the moment because Antonio's fit. If Antonio gets an injury or Benrahma gets an injury, obviously if Benrahma gets an injury, there's an immediate problem. But the conversion rate from Antonio is so high at the minute that might drop in turn, which obviously will reduce the number of assists that Benrahma can offer. Having said that, at this moment in time, I think Benrahma is the one player in FPL that you've got to have. Him and Antonio are the players you've got to have, looking at the fixtures that are coming up. So it's a tough one. Having said you've got to keep Barnes, I believe you've got to keep Barnes if you've got him in this week for Norwich, just because of how poor Norwich are. I think Benrahma offers a greater points opportunity this week than Greenwood does. And maybe if in a couple of weeks you'd plan to take Greenwood out anyway, maybe that's a move that you could look to do now, and give yourself a bit more flexibility in terms of money in the bank. But I wouldn't. It's such a tough one, because Fernandes and Salah being in there as like non-negotiables just take up 2 spots in your midfield. Most people are playing a 4 or a 5 in midfield. I think for this week, Harvey Barnes has to be in. Benrahma offers more than Greenwood, but we've talked about a lot of positives for Greenwood, so it's really just down to personal preference, to be honest. Having said that, I wouldn't take, if I didn't have Greenwood or Barnes, I wouldn't take either of them over Benrahma for this. I wouldn't take out Benrahma to put the other two in, but I also don't think you can really take Barnes out. So it's a tough one.
So after that, I don't think we've got anywhere.
Yeah, basically, I'll be getting to like Friday or something. I'll be like, oh no, got me to make a decision here.
If you haven't got Benrahma, you need to get Benrahma.
And I think what you just said there, Will, is the main point. Is I think you can, if you can allow yourself the flexibility with the price of your, maybe just accept a price drop a little bit on Barnes and potentially Benrahma. We might get some more information. It depends on how you want to play that, because the fact that one's going up and one's going down just makes that impact a little bit more. But the fact that we've still got so much more information still to come, like we said about the things about the red listed countries and so on, and then the press conferences Thursday, Friday, that could impact what happens on the weekend. So I think that if you're able to accept the price hits, then you can try and get a bit more information before you make that decision, because it's so unclear what the move is.
Yeah, it's going to be good fun. It seems like you guys have got an easy decision. I'm just like, I need fun with Benrahma in this team. I was going to question yours though, Sam, with Ben White. Would you not think about keeping Ben White in your team because Arsenal's fixtures change like to a good run?
I'll answer that. No.
No.
No, doesn't matter how good the fixtures are, they can't defend.
Agreed.
Seriously, I thought Arsenal would just have a little bit more spine about them. They are spineless in midfield, in the two guys in front of them. I've absolutely no confidence in Xhaka still. How this guy is still at Arsenal is beyond me. He's just not good enough. And the new guy Lokonga, I don't know. Someone made a really valid point the other day: is that Arsenal sign players that no one else wants to sign, and there must be something in that. Like, you never hear of Arsenal trying to directly compete with someone for a signing, and either Arsenal's scouting network are complete geniuses, but their league positions would probably indicate that's probably not the case, or they're just signing below what they need to.
Do you
Ben
think
White didn't look.
we can sign the players we need to, though? I don't think we can compete with anyone top.
But do you
maybe
not think
just
that you
outside
could
top
have?
4. But
Do you not think that you could have realistically gone and picked up Ben Rama when West Ham picked up Ben Rama? Like, players on that kind of level that are better than some of the options that you've got. I really like Smith Rowe. I do really like Smith Rowe, and I think he will come good. But outside of that, Martinelli, like, no one's scared. No Premier League team is scared when they see Martinelli and Pepe on the wings. No one, not even Norwich, because Pepe's going to give up after half an hour if his team's 1 or 2-0 down, as he literally did against Chelsea. And Martinelli's, I'm sure, a great talent, and I haven't watched enough Arsenal to really make an educated opinion on Martinelli. But from what I have seen in him, he's not a threat whatsoever. And I understand when Aubameyang and Lacazette are back, it's a slightly different kettle of fish. People look at Aubameyang and he's probably the only player in that Arsenal offensive setup that you think, oh, we're going to have a handful here. But yeah, I don't know. Arsenal don't fill me with any confidence at the moment. I'm just reserved from absolutely going insane on them, because they've had a tough couple of fixtures, and it doesn't get any easier for them this weekend. You've probably got the hardest fixture in the league. But I can't see any value in keeping Ben White. And of the two, saving 0.5 million as opposed to saving 0.1 million with Tsimikas, when Tsimikas might even play against Chelsea, and if we think it's going to be tight and cagey, could even get a clean sheet. I think for me personally, in my strategy going forward, it makes sense to save more money with White.
Yeah, I think I'll be coming back to Charlie over the next few weeks about these Arsenal assets, because I do like their run from game week 4, but it's probably going to be 1. I'm not going to be a treble Arsenal. I feel like a Smith Rowe could be a decent budget midfielder if you go in for trying to get Lukaku in your team or something, but I'm a bit unsure about his minutes when Ødegaard's back in there. But I'm sure we'll be asking Charlie questions throughout the next few weeks.
Yeah, we can save that for a later time when it looks more feasible. I think yeah, probably going to be ending up going 3 weeks, 3 losses. Maybe it's not the best time to focus on them.
And at that point, it's when the fixtures sort of go out the window, because you see teams in this situation where the pressure is just going to intensify. So it doesn't matter at this point that you've played Chelsea and Man City to the guys in the Arsenal boardroom. Arteta's going to be under pressure. People make mistakes when they're under pressure, like Liverpool last year when they were just losing game after game at Anfield. They were the best team, like man for man on paper, lining up against almost everyone. They lost at Anfield too, maybe apart from City. But they just lost because the pressure was so high. The mental game wasn't there. They managed to get out of the slump. Arteta needs to get them out of a slump, because if we're assuming that they're going to get beat by City this week, game week 4, you got Norwich at home. If you don't win that, you've got a big problem.
We're kind of taking a bit of a sidetrack into the Arsenal show now, but maybe we should bring it back into an FPL.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe not. No, it's good. Yeah,
we could have a separate podcast on it, maybe.
Yeah, but I feel like Arsenal could come back fresh after international break. Got Norwich. You couldn't have an easier fixture than that, really, to start you off. So you never know.
I think the main thing is and it kind of touches on what Sam was mentioning there, is the team is full of young players that are showing promise, but they're not at the right level yet. So the issue is you're never going to get consistency with those kinds of players. You've got players that are, if you take a look at Saka, someone good enough to break into the England squad and be a starter in quite a few games, but it's you can't rely on those players week in, week out to deliver for you. So that's going to translate over to FPL is whoever you pick for Arsenal is not going to be consistent. You can't expect returns in any week. You won't know when it will come, whether it's in a good fixture or a bad fixture.
Yeah, I think we'll move on for Arsenal. We'll come back to that in future weeks, I'm sure. So we better move on to captains. So who are we thinking of captain? Is it a Bruno or is it elsewhere? I'm assuming Bruno is the most obvious one. Who are you going for, Charlie? Well, thinking of going for as of now.
Yeah, I think in terms of the whole game, Bruno will be the most picked captain, but that's probably just down to a bit of Man United bias with that just tends to happen with Man United players, and obviously particularly Bruno now with the number of points he scores. I would be surprised if he wasn't the highest picked captain this week. So I guess if you want to go safe, then that's an option. I did also happen to see that Mike Dean's the ref for that game, so you could add that into your thinking. Obviously, Sam mentioned earlier the West Ham game that looks filled with goals. So Antonio is on my mind. He may end up just being vice captain. It's just something about, particularly within the recent years of this sort of prominence of midfielders that are just bringing you bags of points. Now moving back to captaining a striker feels a bit odd. Obviously, you're not getting that extra point for the goal, not getting that extra point for a clean sheet. But if you're going to look for one individual that most people have in their teams, Antonio's probably the most likely to bang, and maybe you could see him get a hat trick in that game. If you're going to look anywhere else, maybe Ings possibly as a bit of a differential. But yeah, I would expect one of Antonio or Fernandez to be kind of the main picks.
That sounds very on the fence. Who would you be going for at this point in time if you had to captain now?
If I had to pick one
go for? Yeah,
I think I would go Antonio just because of it's just more fun. I think on a different, you can see an opportunity where I can see him scoring more goals or getting more returns than Bruno. So I think I'd go Antonio.
Yeah, I like the point you make about the getting more points from the midfielders as well. I enjoyed last season captaining defenders because I just knew they could have that higher upside. Obviously, it's all like John Stones. I have a famous triple captain on Digne that I had last season, which went quite well, which isn't going well for you this season yet, Charlie, but you can come good at some stage, Digne. But who would you be going for at this point in time then, Sam, as captain?
It's an interesting one because for me, Salah's out the question just because of my stance on the Liverpool points being shared around a bit too much at home and Chelsea being probably one of the toughest fixtures. And that kind of leads me towards Fernandez. And I said to my own, one of my own things at the start of this season was just make sure that you're captaining your premium assets because they're premium for a reason. They're going to return the highest number of points. And when they do have that haul, you're going to miss out if you're not captaining them against everyone else. So I expect the number of captains, the number of people choosing either Salah or Fernandez will be split by this like Antonio hype train. And I have thought about Antonio myself. I think I'm going to go for Bruno, just because I saw enough in what he was trying to do against Southampton that makes me think that against Wolves he could probably get a few points. But having also said that, I'm back on the fence in that I have Fernandez and Greenwood, so the Manchester United points, should they win, are coming in anyway, which does push it towards Antonio. Like if I captain Fernandez and Manchester United somehow lose 1-0, I've got a big problem if Antonio goes on and scores a couple of goals. So by my own, I'm going to contradict myself one way or the other in that I'm going to either not captain a premium asset, which I said you need to do every week this season, otherwise you're going to regret it, or you're going to end up like over investing in one team for a game week in a fixture that isn't that great when you've got like a fixture that I've basically hyped up for being a 3-4-0 demolition job. And if it is a 3-4-0 demolition job, Antonio's for sure at least getting an assist.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be Antonio. I do think it's going to be Antonio.
But the app might change it back to Fernandes.
I'm doing it on the website this week.
Yeah, I used your thinking this week as well because I obviously had Bruno and Greenwood, so that's why I favoured to go for Salah because I had that cover in United either way. But I think the transfers I'm going to make is going to decide it as well because it's just that Harvey Barnes, isn't it? Because if Harvey Barnes was on form, I wouldn't question about captaining Barnes against Norwich, but it's just way too out there if we don't think he's going to play. So I'm probably going to end up being safe on Bruno because realistically, it's a similar dilemma to what you both said. It's really Antonio or Bruno for me, but I've got this stuck in my head from last season. Antonio was on one of his runs at the back end of last season. Everyone was hyping him up. A lot of people captained him. Played against Fulham. I think it was 0-0, and he got injured. And pulled his hamstring. I'm like, I can just sit deja vu again. I've got that in my mind. He does look quite a bit fitter, but you never know. His hamstring could always be pulled. So at the minute, I think I'd be sticking with Bruno. But the transfer decisions could sway me. But I'm pretty sure if I keep Barnes in, I've not got the confidence that I'm going to captain him as well. So I'll probably bottle that one. When you're looking at the fixtures, is there any particular player that you were scared of not owning this week when you look at the fixtures? For example, I think if Son was fit, he's a good shout against Watford. Is there anyone that stands out for you too?
Jamie Vardy. I think he's going to be the highest scoring player in this game week.
Very good shout.
Definitely. Well, yeah, he got the goal in the first game, didn't he? He didn't really get the service in the second. Obviously, later on he didn't because of the red card as well. I like that as a shout.
Particularly as they're away as well. I think that only helps him. That's going to encourage Norwich on, and that's exactly what Jamie Vardy needs is the space in behind.
Definitely. Is there anyone else you would be worried about, Charlie?
I think that's a great shout. I'm not sure there's really anyone necessarily I'm particularly worried about. I think the kind of, I guess you call it the template team now, it kind of covers most of the kind of key games. I think if you've already got Benrahma, Antonio, like we said, we think that's going to be quite high scoring. I'm not particularly worried about Son. His ownership's not particularly high. And I can see him scoring, but again, I think just long term, it just doesn't make sense to go for him. So yeah, I'm pretty sort of settled with the team, and I think outside of those we've already mentioned, I don't think there's necessarily one that you'd be sort of clamouring to get into your team just yet.
You've got Rafinha, haven't you, Charlie? I think he's one. I'm a bit scared for this fixture, but I don't want him next week I think he's against Liverpool next week. So I wouldn't be thinking of getting him till later on. So I feel like he could do something against Burnley, but I'm just praying he doesn't. It was kind of like last week as well, just praying he wasn't going to do something against Everton and then scores a banger.
Well, I hope he does, just because of all these this stats that I keep rotting out about Burnley's left side. So if he does, I get proved perfectly right. If he doesn't, then I'll maybe have to tone it down with the stats.
Fair enough. I'll give you, as long as if I take Barnes out and he scores, like I'm just going to be crying the whole next pod. So that'll be worse than the Rafinha one. So just probably the last bit. Is there any? We kind of touch on it most weeks. Is there any players like under 10% owned that you would be looking to get into your team going forward? I feel how I've taken this question this week is possible, like enabling players going forward. I know Sam mentioned about getting Lukaku in your team earlier. So, for example, one I said for under 10% owned, I think he still is, Smith Rowe, because he'd be a good way to get Lukaku when if you want to save funds in midfield. Is there any other players outside that we've not spoken about that either of you are looking towards in the coming weeks?
Probably none that I'm really looking towards personally, but a few that maybe some other people might be interested in. So Adam Armstrong and maybe as an enabler at 2.7% ownership when I put these notes together, which I think was yesterday. So even if they've gone up a little bit off this at the time, they were sub 10. So Adam Armstrong, I think he's 5.5 in price, maybe 6. I think he's 5.5.
I think he's 5.5, yeah.
Yeah, it could be a good option if you're looking to free up money for Lukaku. Maybe you could downgrade Tony, save $1 million there, or maybe even downgrade Ings. If you're really looking to, you're certain you want to go for Lukaku, then Armstrong might be a good enabler. One that doesn't really stick out for me as too much value, but I think his potential to have a great game week is James Maddison, 8.4% ownership. Obviously, got that fixture against Norwich. And the last one seems to be in form at the minute is any of the Spurs defenders, but Reguilon with Watford at home at 5.3% ownership. If anybody has picked him up, that could be quite a good differential.
Definitely. Is there any... Go on, Charlie.
Yeah. I was going to say, so jumping on a similar point as well, if we're talking a one-off game week, I did notice that Ricardo Pereira, and it seems a bit odd to bring up a Leicester defender after they've just conceded 4, but obviously you have to take that with the fact that they got that red card before 3 of those goals. And it's not obviously, again, it's not necessarily a downgrade because he's 5.5 million, but he is only 5.6% owned. And the last couple of, he's had some injury issues, so that's kind of hampered his last couple of seasons. But the first season in the league, he got 8 assists, and with a side that's ultimately going to be, you would expect top 6, not entering top 4 probably, but top 6 anyway. You'd expect some clean sheets here and there, and I think particularly obviously this game we've highlighted against Norwich, we'd expect them to do well. And he just seems to be one of those really good attacking fullbacks. And we've said that they've sometimes, when they've got the centre backs back fit for it, they've got the flexibility to move into a back 3, and then he ends up on the wing. So yeah, Pereira is someone I'm interested in. I mentioned earlier as well about this potential. I'm looking at trying to get on this Wolves run. So again, that's more of a long-term thing but their fixture run is just so good that it's kind of forcing me to look into it. So Conor Cody at 4.5 million, he's only 6.3% owned at the moment, which again, it's just going to be because their initial run was tough. But as the fixtures change, I think he could be a cheap rotation option. You're not looking for he's obviously not going to get too many attacking points, the occasional header at a corner or something, but the main thing you're just getting him in is trying to rotate him in the easy fixtures for some goals, for some clean sheets rather.
Yeah, the ones I had, I think I probably mentioned as we've gone throughout, like a Smith Rowe, which I'll probably be coming back to game week 4 onwards, thinking about if I need to save that value in midfield to put it elsewhere. I've got a question mark next to Dele Alli, but I'm definitely not going there for now. Just kind of a cheap one. He seems to be getting a bit more involved, but I think when Kane comes back in, he's probably not going to be the option. And then they also had the Watford 2 of Dennis up front, which I think is a good way to save if we wanted to like downgrade Ings to a cheaper option next week, and then upgrade like Tony or someone up to Lukaku eventually is a good way to save funds. I want to see Dennis probably in the next fixture to see if he's going to be playing. He started the first 2 games, so I want to see if he'll start the 3rd one as well. So it could be a possible one, and Sar's look decent for them because Watford have got a decent little run. I think game week 4 to about 7, which couldn't be too bad as well if you need to rotate him in. So I think there's quite a few options, especially in that midfield. I feel like there's so many options, like 5.5 to 7.5, which is pretty ridiculous to choose from, as I'm having the issue, as you've seen with Barnes, etc. But I think we have covered everything, guys, unless you've got anything else you want to mention before we call it.
No, all good from me.
Yeah, all good from me.
Yeah, I feel like we keep getting longer every week. Halfway through, we was like, all right, and then we've just gone all on it with transfers, I think. But that's great, and we'll call it there. Appreciate everyone listening, and thank you again for Sam and Charlie for being on again. And we'll confirm, because we've got an international break coming up, haven't we? We'll have to work out if we'll do an in-between one or not, but they'll definitely be next week or the week after. And I appreciate everyone for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.